The fires crackled as the moon rose high above the Dothraki Sea. In another life, Viserys Targaryen would have died tonight, crowned with molten gold by Khal Drogo for his arrogance. But fate, as it sometimes does, wove a different thread through the tapestry of time. Instead of receiving his golden crown, Viserys was dragged away by Doreah and Jiki, Daenerys' handmaidens, who acted on her silent nod. That night, Dany chose mercy, not for love, but for strategy. Her child with Drogo was growing inside her, and she knew her brother's death would change everything. For now Viserys would live, but not as a prince. As a shadow. Humiliated, broken, and forced to ride at the rear of the Khalasar, Viserys was stripped of his pride. The whip lashes on his back spoke of his failure, and his silver hair hung like a shroud over sunburnt skin. He cursed his sister, cursed Drogo, cursed the Dothraki, but above all he cursed himself for being weak. Weeks passed. Daenerys grew in power and presence, glowing with pregnancy and fire. The Khalasar began to call her Khaleesi with reverence. Viserys watched from the sidelines, a ghost haunting her rise. He was supposed to be the dragon, the last son of Rhaegar's line, but he was nothing, just a beggar king, wearing rags instead of rubies. One night, under a sky littered with stars, Viserys stumbled upon an old woman outside the Khalasar. She wore robes of ash grey and had eyes that shimmered like smoke. "You seek a crown," she rasped, "but you were meant for fire." Viserys, drunk on fermented mare's milk, laughed bitterly. "I was born of fire. The dragon does not burn." The woman stepped closer. "No, but you were never the dragon, not until now." She handed him a vial filled with black liquid and whispered words in High Valyrian that made his blood run cold and hot all at once. "Drink and dream of flame. Or walk and remain forgotten." Viserys hesitated, but dreams were all he had left. He drank. The fever took him immediately. He collapsed in the grass, convulsing. His veins felt like molten gold, not from Drogo's rage, but from something older, darker, deeper. He saw visions of his ancestors, of dragons, of Aegon the Conqueror's firestorm over Harrenhal, and in the heart of it all, a voice echoed, "You are not unworthy. You are unmade. Become." He woke 3 days later, weak, fevered but alive. His eyes burned with something new. Clarity, perhaps, or madness. Daenerys visited him, belly heavy with child, and sat beside him in silence. He looked at her not with rage, but understanding. "You were right to stop me," he said. "I was not the dragon, but I am becoming." Dany frowned. "You sound like a man who has seen visions." "I've seen our ancestors," he whispered, "and they wept for what I had become. When Drogo fell ill after the cursed ritual of Miri Maz-Dur, Viserys was not the man he once was. He did not beg for a crown, nor lash out at Dany. Instead, he took her aside. "We must leave," he said. "This is not our war anymore. The fire is calling us east, not west." And she listened. The eggs. That night, under the black sky, Viserys placed his hands on the 3 dragon eggs gifted to Dany. Something in his blood, changed, ancient, sang in harmony with the stone. He didn't burn. The shell cracked beneath his palm, not all the way. Not yet, but enough for the flame inside to breathe. Viserys smiled, not with pride, but purpose. "The dragon wakes," he murmured. The winds of the great grass sea carried the scent of blood and prophecy. Khal Drogo lay dying, a shadow of the mighty horse lord he once was. His blood riders spoke of mercy-killing, and the Khalasar began to splinter. Death stalked the camp like a wolf in the tall grass, but in the center of this crumbling empire, Viserys Targaryen stood taller than he ever had. He was thinner, paler, and still bore the marks of Dothraki cruelty. But his eyes, those violet eyes, now shimmered with a strange fire. Something ancient stirred in him, and the heat in his veins no longer came from anger. It came from awakening. He spent his days tending to the dragon eggs. Dany watched, uncertain whether her brother had gone mad or found a new form of clarity. He would whisper to the eggs in Valyrian, press his forehead against their shells, and hum lullabies their mother used to sing in the Red Keep. "The fire speaks," he told Dany one night. But not to you, not yet. It speaks to me, sister. You think you're their rider? She asked, her voice edged with disbelief. No, he said. I know I am. Dany looked away. She felt the life inside her kick. Her son, Rhaego, the stallion who mounts the world, was meant to lead armies. Perhaps her brother could serve that destiny, or perhaps he would try to steal it. As Drogo slipped further into silence, Mirri Maz Duur's cursed spell took its toll. Dany, desperate, watched her dream husband become an empty shell. In her grief, she turned to the pyre. But this time, Viserys stopped. Her you walk into flame for what? To awaken dragons, I already hear them in my bones. She stared at him, eyes full of tears. Then let us burn together. If they wake, they'll choose who they want. And so, under a sky of stars and smoke, Viserys and Daenerys built a funeral pyre higher than any before it. Drogo's body, wrapped in silks and oils, was laid at its heart. Around him they placed the dragon eggs, but one egg was missing, the cream-colored one. Viserys had taken it days before, keeping it close at all times. He placed it now carefully at the center of the flames. Then he looked at Dany. You are blood of the dragon, he said softly. But tonight I will be fireborn. The fire was lit. The night roared with heat. The air itself seemed to pulse with energy, as if the old gods had been stirred from their slumber. And into the flames Viserys walked, not Daenerys. He did not scream. The fire licked at his skin like a lover's touch, and the golden blaze swallowed him whole. Dany cried out in horror, but then gasped. He did not burn. The fire curled around him like a cloak, dancing on his skin but leaving no mark. The heat rose, swallowing the pyre, and the sky cracked open with thunder. The earth shook, and then a sound, a crack, a hiss, a roar. From the pyre, one of the dragon eggs burst open, then another, then the third, and from the ash and bone and smoke rose three winged shadows, black, green, and gold. They shrieked into the night, circling above the pyre. One, larger, older, settled on Viserys' shoulder, its golden eyes matching his own. The fire died down. Viserys emerged, ash-coated but alive, his long white hair glowing like moonlight, his skin untouched. He held one dragon in his arms. Another followed at his feet. The third perched behind him like a crown of flame. Dany fell to her knees. You are the dragon." Viserys knelt before her. "No, sister, we are." The fire was waiting, for both of us. Word spread through. The remnants of the Khalasar, the blood of Valyria, had awakened the flame. The Dothraki, now scattered and leaderless, began to return, whispering of the Fire Prince. Some called him Vezof Anhan, the Burning One. But Viserys was no longer the petty prince who had begged for a crown. He was reborn, forged by fire, humbled by failure, and now led by purpose. He named the dragons Elikis, the black-winged shadow of death; Rhaenyra, the green-eyed fury of a fallen Queen Balerion; the golden-scaled terror, who roared like the wind through the ruins of old Valyria, and with them Viserys whispered of conquest. But not yet. First, they would fly east, to Qarth, to Asshai, to the places of ancient power. For the true war, the Fire War, was coming. And Viserys would not face it as a beggar. He would face it as the dragon. The salt winds of the summer sea battered the sails of their stolen ship, yet the fire within Viserys never dimmed. They left the scorched remnants of Drogo's Khalasar behind, carrying only 3 dragons, a child not yet born and 2 Targaryens reborn in spirit. Their destination, Qarth, the great city of splendor and secrets. A place where power wore masks and the dead whispered from marble walls. Daenerys stood at the prow, hand resting on her belly, her silver hair dancing in the breeze. She no longer looked at her brother with fear, but neither did she trust him, entirely. Viserys had changed, yes, but she could not yet tell whether he had found balance or simply traded madness for prophecy. He spent hours in quiet communion with the dragons. They grew faster than they should have, unnaturally so, their wings stretched like sails, their hunger endless. At night, they would nest around him as he read from old Valyrian texts, murmuring half-forgotten rhymes from their ancestors. "We are the flame reborn," he would say. and they are our wings. Qarth rose from the desert like a jewel carved from bone. Its walls shimmered with color and gold, and behind its gates waited the 13, the rulers who smiled with their teeth but never their eyes. They welcomed Dany with curiosity. But it was Viserys who silenced them. He arrived at their hall clad in black robes lined with red silk, the dragons perched around him like sentinels. When Xaro Daxos offered him riches and wine, Viserys simply let Balerion hiss, his golden flames licking the marble floor. "We do not beg," he said, voice cold as winter. "We are Targaryens." Even the warlocks of the House of the Undying watched him with wary fascination. Pyat Pree, with his blue lips and sly smile, bowed deeper than he ever had for Daenerys. "You carry not just flame," the warlock whispered, "but memory. The echoes of Valyria tremble when you speak. Will you enter the house, Prince of Fire?" Viserys agreed. The House of the Undying was no place for the sane. Doors led to madness, and the air itself whispered lies. But Viserys walked through its halls like a man returning home. He saw visions, dozens, his mother, Rhaella, screaming in childbirth. His father, the Mad King, laughing as wildfire devoured innocence. Rhaegar, his noble brother, placing a crown of winter roses on Lyanna Stark's head. Aegon the Conqueror standing over the smoking ruins of Harrenhal. And deeper still, he saw himself on a throne of molten stone, dragons circling above, a city in ashes at his feet. But he wept not from pride. He wept because the throne was empty. His sister stood beside it, holding a child with black hair and violet eyes. The voice returned, older than time, older than kings. One flame for vengeance, one for rebirth, one for sacrifice. He did not know what it meant, but it clung to him like smoke. He emerged from the house pale and trembling, but not broken. The warlocks bowed. Pyat Pree whispered, "You have seen, you have chosen." "I have understood," Viserys replied. "There is no throne without fire, but fire without purpose is destruction. I will not be my father." As weeks passed in Qarth, dragons growing. In shadowed courtyards the people began to whisper not just of Daenerys but of her brother, the Flame Prince, the Golden Shadow, the Fireborn. And yet not all were content. Xaro grew wary. The warlocks plotted. Assassins came in the night. Viserys killed them himself. He moved like a man with no fear of death, and perhaps he had none. The fire had taken that from him, or given him something worse. When the time came to leave Qarth, it was not with gold nor allies. It was with blood and flame. Pyat Pree attempted to trap them in the warlock's tower, but the dragons burned their way free, tearing through silk and shadow, howling into the Qarthian sky. Aelekis bit Pyat's throat. Rhaenyra scorched the gardens. Balerion set the gates aflame, and Viserys stood in the ashes, cloak billowing, face serene. "We do not ask," he said as they boarded their ship. "We take what is owed." At sea once more, Daenerys stood beside him, hand on her unborn son. "You are becoming something, Viserys," she said softly. "But what, a conqueror, a tyrant?" He looked at her, and for the first time there was no pride, only something deeper, something human. "I do not know," he said. "But I know this. The dragons are not born to be caged. Nor are we." The sea turned black as ink, the sky starless, and the winds fell silent as their ship neared Asshai by the Shadow, a city at the edge of the world, where the rivers ran thick with whispering sorcery and the people wore masks of silence and bone. Few dared to sail this far east. Fewer still returned. But Viserys Targaryen came not as a beggar, nor as a man. He came as fire made flesh, with 3 dragons soaring above him and a sister carrying the unborn prince of prophecy. Their arrival went unnoticed by most. Asshai welcomed no one. Its docks were empty, and its black stone streets stretched endlessly into a city too large for the living. But the ones who waited in the shadows felt the tremor in the air. The dragon had come. They found shelter in a crumbling tower that once belonged to a Maegi of old Valyria. The walls were lined with dead candles, all of which lit when Viserys stepped across the threshold. The dragons howled into the night, disturbed by the air, thick with the scent of old magic and decay. "I don't like this place," Daenerys murmured. No one does, Viserys replied, brushing dust from an obsidian mirror. But the truth sleeps here. For weeks, Viserys studied in the forbidden libraries, trading dreams with blind priests and silent monks. The Shadowbinders, cloaked in red veils, watched him with reverence and fear. Some whispered that he was Azor Ahai reborn. Others called him the heir of doom, a harbinger of a second Valyria. But Viserys ignored them. He read of dragons that swallowed moons, of Valyrian firebinding, of the night that never ends, and the flame needed to end it. Every night he burned incense made from ghost grass and smoked black lotus, entering deep trances. He spoke to ancestors, to forgotten gods, and perhaps to something darker. And every night the same words returned. One flame for vengeance, one for rebirth, one for sacrifice. One evening a woman came to him, tall, cloaked in robes that shimmered like oil, her face covered in a red mask carved with Valyrian glyphs. "I have waited long for you," she said in the tongue of old Valyria. "Who are you?" Viserys asked. "I am called Rasael, a Shadowbinder, and I know what you seek." She led him beneath the tower into a cavern of glowing stone. In its center stood a pool of black water, still as death. Rasael knelt and traced symbols in the air. "You have awakened flame, Prince, but to master it you must understand what it costs." Viserys stepped to the water's edge. "Show me." Visions seized him. Not dreams, truths. He saw Westeros in ruin, King's Landing ablaze, dragons fighting dragons in the sky, snow burying Winterfell, and above it all, an army of dead marching beneath banners of ice. He saw himself, older, crowned, but hollow, a tyrant, a savior, a broken man with fire in his eyes and ash at his feet. Then he saw Daenerys standing before him, blood on her hands. And finally, he saw the child, Dany's son, born with the eyes of Rhaegar and the fury of the storm. "He is the flame of sacrifice," the voice said. "To stop the darkness one must burn. Not all dragons are destined to fly." Viserys fell to his knees, shaking. "What does it mean?" he asked Rasael. "It means you have a choice," she said. "You can burn the world to rule it, or burn yourself to save it. Fire is not just power, Prince, it is the price." Back in the tower, Daenerys waited, worried. Her brother had grown quieter, colder. His eyes, once mad with ambition, were now heavy with secrets. He sat beside her and gently placed a hand on her stomach. "He is strong," Viserys whispered, "and the fire loves him." "You saw him?" she asked. "Yes, in every future." "In every end," she gripped his hand. "Tell me he lives." He didn't answer. They left Asshai under a moonless sky, with the dragons flying low and silent. Viserys did not look back. The fire inside him had changed. He no longer sought a throne for himself. He sought something greater, something darker, and infinitely more dangerous, a future worth burning for. As their ship sailed toward the free cities, a red star streaked across the sky. The dragons roared, and the long night stirred in the far, frozen north. The free cities whispered of fire once more, in the taverns of Pentos, in the brothels of Lys, in the shadow markets of Tyrosh. One name returned with the winds from the east: Viserys Targaryen, the Fire Prince, reborn from flame with 3 dragons at his command. The tale grew in every telling. Some said he had slain a god in Asshai. Others claimed he drank wildfire and survived. But none could deny the truth that soared above the waves. The dragons were real and they were coming west. They docked in Pentos under false names, but word spread quickly. Magisters lined up to offer support: gold, ships, soldiers, all wanted a piece of the dragon's return. Some remembered his birth, others simply feared what he had become. Illyrio Mopatis, the fat magister who once offered Daenerys to Khal Drogo, now bowed deeply before Viserys. "You were once a boy with rage, Indy." "Your eyes," Illyrio murmured. "Now you wear prophecy like armor." "I wear ash and fire," Viserys replied, "and I have no room for liars this time." But there were allies still willing to believe. The Golden Company, long loyal to the Blackfire line, heard rumors. of a true Targaryen risen from flame, and turned their ears toward Pentos. The younger sons of noble houses from Volantis and Myr sent envoys, and in Braavos, the faceless men whispered that death walked in the dragon's shadow. Yet it was not power Viserys sought, it was clarity. He studied the war maps of Westeros. He listened to ravens from the narrow sea. He watched Daenerys, now, round with child, rest beneath the wings of Balerion in the Pentoshi Gardens. And he dreamed. Every night he saw the Iron Throne. But it was empty, surrounded by corpses. Smoke filled the Red Keep, and bells rang not in victory, but mourning. And he... Always the voice returned, one flame for vengeance, one for rebirth, one for sacrifice. One evening he stood at the balcony of Illyrio's manse, gazing westward across the sea. Dany joined him, her steps slow under the weight of motherhood. "You don't speak of Westeros anymore," she said. "Why?" Viserys was silent for a long time, then, "Because I do not know if we are meant to rule it, only to burn it," she recoiled. "You sound like our father." "No, he wanted to burn it because he lost. I may burn it because I see." "See what?" "That there may be no throne to claim, no realm left to rule, only a war in the dark, and the fire we carry may be all that stops it." That night, one of the dragons, Alicus, the black-winged eldest, flew north on his own, unbidden. He returned 3 days later, his claws slick with blood and frost clinging to his wings. Viserys touched the beast's scales and saw flashes of snow, of shadows, of creatures with eyes like blue fire. The dead were moving, and they were hungry. It changed everything. No longer was Westeros just the land of his stolen birthright. It was the place where the true war would unfold. The fire within him was not meant to ignite thrones, but to hold back the dark, and so he called his sister, his council, and the commanders of the Golden Company, now pledged to his cause. "Go not to conquer," Viserys declared, "but to warn, to gather, to fight." Some laughed, others whispered that he had gone mad with shadows and prophecy, but the dragons did not laugh. They circled above like omens, casting firelight on the stone walls. And Daenerys, ever watching, felt her child turn again. "He knows," she whispered. "The child knows." 2 weeks later they set sail, not with a fleet of fire and blood, but a small armada, swift, sharp, and silent. Viserys stood at the prow, his dragons trailing behind in the skies like living banners. He wore black and red armor etched with the sigil of House Targaryen, three-headed, wreathed in flame. In his hand he carried no crown, no sword, only a scroll of dragon glass and a whisper from the flames. Westeros would not welcome him. The lords would fear him. The maesters would doubt him. The people would see him as his father reborn. But Viserys knew this was the only path left, because winter was not coming. It had already begun. The coast of Dragonstone rose from the mist like a blackened crown, jagged cliffs, angry seas, and towers that remembered dragons. Once the seat of House Targaryen, now abandoned by fire and lost to salt, it welcomed its lost prince not with trumpets, but with silence. Viserys Targaryen stepped onto the shore with boots of soot-stained leather and eyes that had seen, too, many futures. Behind him flew his dragons, circling the keep like crows around a battlefield. Daenerys followed, one hand on her swollen belly, the other resting lightly on Alekis's warm scales. She was close now. The child stirred constantly, as if sensing the land of his blood. They had returned, but not as conquerors. The raven arrived on the third night. It bore the seal of the Night's Watch. Viserys opened the scroll by candlelight. His lips moved slowly over the words. A wall breached, a Lord Commander slain, the dead marching south. He said nothing at first, but that night he fed the dragons raw venison and whispered to them in Valyrian, flames flickering in their throats, like growing tempests. 2 days later, Jon Snow arrived. He came not as a bastard, but as a commander. His face bore the weight of winter, and his eyes, dark, defiant, met Viserys's with neither awe nor fear. "You're not the king I expected," Jon said simply. Viserys gave a faint smile. "And you're not the Snow I imagined." Their meeting was cold at first. Distrust bloomed quickly. Jon spoke of the Night King, of the wall falling, of ancient horrors returning. Viserys listened. He asked one question. Would you die to stop it? Jon didn't hesitate. Yes, Viserys nodded. Then we fight together, not as kings, as shields. Over the next weeks, the great houses of Westeros were summoned to Dragonstone. Few came. Tyrion Lannister, skeptical but curious, arrived from King's Landing under a banner of truce. Davos Seaworth rode in with Jon's men, bearing the truth of the North. Sansa Stark, cold and wary, sent a raven, but no forces, and Cersei. She sent silence. Still Viserys did not flinch. He had not come to be loved. He had come to warn, to burn or to die trying. When Daenerys went into labor, the sky turned red. Thunder cracked above the castle, and the dragons shrieked into the storm. Viserys stood at the gates as the midwives screamed behind him. He did not pray. He only watched the sky. The child was born at the hour of the wolf. He did not cry. He roared. They named him Rhaegar, after the brother Viserys still mourned. His hair was pale silver, but his eyes, violet rimmed with embers, held the storm of the future. Even the dragons bowed their heads when he wailed, but joy did not last. A raven from the north arrived the next day. Winterfell had fallen. The night. King marched toward King's Landing, leaving ice and corpses in his wake. Viserys stood in the council room, the child in his arms, the weight of prophecy on his shoulders. The words returned, one flame for vengeance, one for rebirth, one for sacrifice. He looked to Daenerys, then to Rhaegar, and he understood. That night, beneath the burning torches of Dragonstone, he called his followers, his allies, his sister. I was born of rage, molded by pride. I chased thrones, crowns, and ghosts. He looked down at the child in his arms. But the true fire is not in ruling. It is in ending the night, ending the cycle, ending the darkness. He kissed his nephew's brow. I am the flame of sacrifice. Daenerys shook her head, tears streaming. No, it doesn't have to be. It does, he said softly. The fire spoke long ago. I only listened too late. He flew north that night alone, on Aelekis with the wind roaring and the snow biting, past rivers frozen in time, past cities already dead, toward the storm, toward the Night King. No banners followed, no army marched, just a man and a dragon born of fire destined to end it. Above the ruins of Moat Cailin he found them, white shadows marching, a blizzard of death. The Night King stood at their center, silent, still, soulless. Viserys landed before him, dismounted, and lit the sky. A fire brighter than dawn erupted from the heavens. Aelekis screamed one last time and dove into the ranks of the dead. Viserys walked into the flames, unburning, unbroken, roaring a single word in Valyrian, Dracarys. The Night King raised a hand. The flames parted, but not enough. Viserys touched him, and the fire leapt from his soul like a sun unleashed. The scream shattered the sky, and the Night King burned. When dawn broke, Jon Snow found only ashes, and a sword melted into stone. Where the Night King had stood, nothing remained. Back on Dragonstone, Daenerys held her son and looked eastward. The dragons still circled above, but one was gone. The flame of vengeance had passed. The flame of rebirth was held in her arms, and the flame of sacrifice had saved them all.